Faith moves mountains. Faith moves mountains. I keep my eyes on high. Mustard seed in my hand. Faith moves mountains. Faith moves mountains. If all it takes is faith, then I still stand.
Hey you guys, welcome back. It's Rebecca. I'm happy to have you guys here, and today we have another special guest with us. So before we get started and I introduce him, I want to go ahead and just introduce the topic. So of course we're continuing with the theme, when God doesn't stop the pain. However, this week we're going to focus on how financial literacy affects us when we are going through the grieving process. So we're going to more so look at it as the cost of grief. The podcast, this podcast is where healing meets financial literacy. Of course, again, I am Rebecca, and every loss leaves more than emotional scars. It can leave debt, uncertainty, fear, and questions that no one prepares us to answer. So together today, we are going to learn how to heal our hearts, rebuild our finances, and create a legacy of our own. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And Ron, I'm going to go ahead and have you introduce yourself.
Wonderful and happy to be here, Rebecca. My name is Ron Monaco. I am a founder as well as a financial and credit repair professional. I've been in the industry for 22 years, and certainly, what we're going to be speaking of today really hits home for me, both on the personal life as a family man and a father of three. But also on the professional level, because, specifically when we're talking about grief, the one state of health that I think doesn't get discussed enough is financial health. We talk about medical health, we talk about mental health, but unfortunately, I think the financial side doesn't get brought up enough, and how much stress that really causes the everyday person, particularly in the world we live today, and kind of the shame spiral that can create. And, one of my greatest accomplishments, or at least that I try to accomplish, is helping those get to the other side, to put that guard down and realize that healing only begins when you acknowledge the root of the problem and make the changes and address your financial health as you would in any other crises department.
Of course. And I like that you said, in any other crisis department. So why do you feel that grief make financial decision making so difficult?
That's a great question. I think it becomes part of the shame. I think when we talk about financials, when we talk about credit scores, right, people kind of wear that as a badge, and meaning they almost kind of portray it or feel portrayed as though, say, your credit score as a reflection of your identity. And it's not. It's not. Life happens, right? Unfortunately, it's not always a Cinderella story. There's divorce in the world. There's loss of loved ones. You could lose a job. There's so many things that, make people have a hard time facing the reality of the financial world, because they feel as though they're going to be judged as if that's a reflection of their character. And I think it's important that people realize that these things can get better. Your credit score, for example, or your financial situation, most importantly, it's not a reflection of your character. You're allowed, even if you make mistakes, all it is a reflection, of your system. Right. And the beautiful part about that is that those things can be better. We can educate ourselves, but most importantly, it's about committing to ourselves and drawing that line in the sand that enough is enough, and that you're not going to let that sandbag you down anymore. And once you kind of face it and you take those first steps, it's amazing the momentum you get and how uplifting that can be, and how it can really affect so many more departments of your life.
Right. I love that you said, facing it head on, because a lot of times I feel with finances particularly, especially when you're a little bit more low income, you have that difficulty of being accountable for saving money. a lot of times we go through these periods where we go through times where we don't have money. So when we do have the money, what do we want to do? We want to enjoy ourselves, and
Right.
so, and that accountability piece is so key. I'm so happy that you highlighted that.
No, thank you. I mean, I see it all the time. I've watched people believe that they're failures because of a number on a credit report or because of a bill or a collection coming in the mail. And like I said, your credit score, it just measures a financial history. It does not measure your value as a human being. And I think when people start to separate those two things, they can begin rebuilding confidence. And that's ultimately where the beginning starts.
Right. So in your experience, what do you think are the first 3 financial steps that everyone should take after experiencing this significant loss, either with grief or even with just their finances, grief within the finances?
Yeah, no, and another great question, and definitely kind of a couple of parts that I would have to that. Step 1 is to simplify everything, right? People, especially when you go through something devastating, no matter what category of life that may be, we tend, because of the human emotion, I think, to amplify that, and people seem to think that they have 1,000 problems. But usually they have 3 or 4 priorities, and once there's a plan, fear can kind of start disappearing, right? That allows you to drop the guard. So simplification of what you have in front of you, and it sounds simple because it is. It's just, again, it's taking those steps. And then another thing is just being more involved. Don't put things off to the side. Face them head on, like we said. Your financial life, it's a lot like physical therapy, is kind of how I look at it, right? You don't become healthy in one appointment, right? You make small improvements consistently. Eventually, those small improvements can completely change your life. And I think that's important as well, and kind of why I mentioned it as a part of health and wellness, because just like anything else in life, whether it's you go to the doctor, you have to go for regular checkups, and your financials are the same thing. You have to audit yourself, and don't be afraid to educate yourself. Take the time. Everybody always feels so limited in time, but 10 minutes a day to learn something or to review something in the financial world, whether it's a goal you're aspiring towards or just getting control of your own financial world, it's absolutely needed. I mean, if we only went and saw the doctor every time we needed emergency surgery, that's gonna create a lot of stress that's avoidable. Right. So, I think simplification, and I think obviously, again, constant maintenance is really important, and it really starts there. So if you're ready to kind of move the needle forward and regain your financial confidence, it's just as easy to start there.
Right. Thank you. And I love that you said simplification. It really puts me in the mind of ownership, right? Owning what's the most important and setting everything else to the side.
Yes, absolutely.
And so with that reality of taking ownership, what do you feel like financial conversations within the family should look like before a crisis even happens? Because I know personally for me, growing up in my household, we never talked about finances. The only time we really had that discussion is when it was tax time or we got a large lump sum of money. And even then, right. I'm just being honest here,
I know it. No, I believe me. I get it.
And then the only other time we talked about it is when you had to borrow money or you needed money. So when I got older, I never knew the importance of financial literacy. So what do you feel how should that conversation happen in families before the crisis happens?
Yeah, and again, another fantastic question, and you really hit the head on the nail on that one, and I can relate to that on a personal level, right? Because, myself, I come from a very blue-collar working family, and just like you highlighted, when it comes to the financial world, right? We grew up in a system, in an educational system that didn't really go out of their way to teach it other than how to subtract from what you have in a checkbook, right? And we surely didn't sit around the Sunday dinner table and talk about financial well-being of the family. These are things that really do kind of stay in a dark corridor, so to speak, and then we evolve, we grow up, and then if you come from that kind of working family as I did, you really kind of have to learn through taking some lumps, unfortunately, because at the end of the day, unless you're a 1%er, and obviously the other 99 of us aren't, it's you can't teach good habits when you're really just focusing on survival as opposed to thrival, right? And so one thing that I would say as far as having that conversation is to keep it free of judgment, especially within the family. I mean, even the most put together family, if you keep bias and judgment out of the conversation and you humanize the process and realize that you're in it together, people are entitled to make mistakes and entitled to learn from those mistakes, I think that allows that blanket of shame to kind of not feel so heavy, because we already feel it, because it's for what you're speaking of. How do we talk about it? Just as the same side of why we don't. It's the same reason why people avoid even looking at it, right? Even if you're not in a family environment, because money, let's face it, money carries emotion. People think that they're looking at numbers, but they're really, in all honesty, they're just reliving disappointment, fear, shame, regret, right? Avoiding the numbers feels safer in the short term, but it keeps people stuck. And once they understand their situation clearly, then they can begin to move forward. So the most important thing is to just to itemize a part of your day, a part of your week that you can have that conversation. Actually look at the full picture of what your current position in, right? And as simple as it sounds, make sure that you actually put some pen to paper here. We live in such a technological world that I think that sometimes we somehow separate ourselves from how involved we really need to be in our financials. So, grabbing a pen and a notebook and, actually putting out your budget, what you're earning, what you've reserved, if anything, what your expected bills are that need to go out, and start to prioritize your needs from your wants. I mean, like you said, when we come into some money, especially life is stressful enough, right? Life's going to keep lifing. And at the end of the day, we look for that quick fix, right? Whether it's, a quick decision or a quick getaway or a quick shopping spree, because in the short term, that makes us feel good. It gives you an elation, if you will. But we all know, just like any, or similar, I should say, to an addiction, once you get off of that elated environment, you're back into the shame spiral, because then you're attacking yourself. I know this because years ago I did it to myself. And you feel good in the moment, and then you turn around and then you live with regret, right? Why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that. And we know this going into it, but it goes back, Rebecca, to the accountability side of things. If you want to get to the other side of the grief of this subject, then the first thing that you have to do to yourself, most importantly, and to your loved ones that are in the journey with you, is to make a commitment to be better, to learn better, and to actually put thought into action. So I think if you can have a safe environment, an open conversation, and actually put pen to paper and really look at things, that will help anybody hold themselves more accountable than being able to just not look at the email, being able to just throw away the piece of mail or avoid the collection call. It's never going to get better until you face it.
Right, right. That I'm so grateful for the answer. Um, a lot of times with that, we do like to avoid those tough conversations. So, how do you feel someone can begin building that tenacity so they can build on their financial resilience?
I would say, again, it starts with the commitment, and realistically, it's one of those things where there's no way to necessarily dip your toes into the pool. It's in my honest opinion, if you're ready to make that commitment to yourself, you got to be all in. You have to fully commit and make the jump, and just pull the ripcord. Just say, okay, we got to have this conversation, or I have to look in the mirror. I have to prioritize. So the beginning process is really just the ownership aspect, whether it's something that you could control or not. And again, there's so many situations. Everybody is so unique into what maybe got them into some financial turmoil. You certainly can't control the loss of a loved one. You certainly may not have been able to control the loss of your income. Right. Spouses go separate ways, right? And so I think most importantly, it starts at your core. It starts with your commitment to yourself, because like in anything in this world, you can't be better for anyone unless you can be better for yourself. So I think there's really no way to sugarcoat that answer other than say, if you feel that you're ready to start taking some of that burden off your shoulders, then you got to pull the ripcord. You got to look at it, because here's the thing. It's like anything in life. It's harder at first because of your own fear, because of your own emotion. That's within the subject. But once you face it, like anything, like, the interview that you may have been scared to attend, or maybe felt, it was above your head and you didn't want to make a fool of yourself. So, you have those awkward emotions, but then you get into a conversation, and it just kind of starts to happen organically. And then you just let what's good about you shine in that moment. It's no different than beginning your financial journey. It's just making the commitment to step across the line, and realizing that in life it's okay sometimes to make yourself uncomfortable if it's for your long-term gain.
Right, right. And so I know you said you just have to rip that band-aid off and just jump straight in there. So when someone is working with you, what do you feel was the most valuable lesson that a client has taught you towards how you view financial literacy?
I think the most valuable thing, and kind of the emphasis that I get from a lot of my clients, because with my clients, it really kind of starts with that layer of guilt, that shame spiral. And like, for example, one thing that really sticks out to me, for example, is, have you ever, and I'm sorry to kind of turn this as a question towards you, but have you ever noticed how people apologize before talking about money?
Yes.
Right? Like, people say things like, I know I messed up. I should have done better. I know this is embarrassing, right? And right out of the gate, that tells me that they're carrying shame, not just debt. And that's the feedback that I get the most from my client base, is the ability to put that shame down, to, again, realize that this is not a reflection of your character or your soul. This is just something that you've had to go through. Life will put hurdles in your way. Sometimes we don't always make the best decisions for ourselves, but again, what is a reflection of your character is if you're ready to make the commitment to yourself to be better, to better your life, and ultimately and ideally for your loved ones around you. So one of the biggest feedbacks that I think I get is that I'm able to just get people to drop their guard, right? No finger pointing, no self-deprecation, just understanding that life happens. You can only control the controllables, and the one thing that we can absolutely control is how we act. And I think I get a lot of that is once the psychology of that sentiment really starts to set in people, into people's minds, and you see an ease, right? You see their shoulders relax, and you realize that, they're not in a judgmental conversation. And then, once their guard is down, then you can really start to build the blueprint and the roadmap to where they ultimately want to be and how to overcome the hurdles in their way. So I think, the biggest feedback that I would get, like I said, is just the ability to separate emotion from action.
Right. So I feel like for me, I often get clients who come in during the grieving process, and grief is a whirlwind. It's nothing linear, right? It's like a mountain.
Absolutely.
One day you're okay, the next day you're low. You have highs, you have lows, and I feel like the most important part that I try to help my clients get through when they're struggling with it is denial. Sometimes they come in and they kind of know the reality of it, but they also have this other piece of reality that's also foreshadowing the real reality of it. How do you help clients maneuver through that denial process? And when I say denial process, it's like, I know I have this problem. I know I'm struggling with this financial piece. And I know I need to take accountability, but and I'm really ready to do it, but I'm still going to go out here and buy this whatever handbag, or go and get my nails done, even though I don't need them done. Like pieces and aspects of that. How do you help them really sit down and say, hey, this is the reality of your finances?
Yeah, no, and that's very valid. When speaking with my clients, ultimately, I know the reality is that beyond our conversation, only my client can, put our conversation or my advice into action. So ultimately, obviously, beyond my scope of things, people are still going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. I mean, it's human nature. But what I really just try to emphasize on is the feeling, right? Is when you bring up something that they already did, something they already disclosed to you, or in my world, I'm looking directly at their finances, right? So I'm seeing what they spent, where they spent it, as I help them create the roadmap and where we can kind of trim the fat, so to speak. So with them, it's I think always important, again, and this is back to the simplification of things, is reminding them of how that made them feel, right? Look at it in terms of steps, right? In the moment, how did you feel? Right. How did you feel the next day? Remind them that, that the only way to take accountability is to stop the direction you're going in, right? If you're telling me that, Ron, I'm in a bad way, I can't get my financial world together, feels like the walls are sinking in around me, but then you continue to make the same mistakes, knowing and being educated at that point that, if I maybe just deviate from my normal day-to-day progression, I think there's a humility in that, getting people to acknowledge things out loud, getting them to say it and acknowledge it, because again, in our minds, we're kind of protected, right? Because
Right.
we can kind of drown out the noise or drown out the fear for a time being, especially if you got a few extra bucks in your pocket to make you feel better. And the one thing just to counter that, is, one thing that I've really learned, both personally and again professionally, is financial trauma is absolutely real.
Yes.
If somebody has been so far to the point that they've experienced things like foreclosure, bankruptcy, identity theft, divorce, right? Or even, again, years of collection calls, avoiding those collectors for maybe a bad debt. People often then begin making decisions based on fear instead of strategy. And part of rebuilding is helping people replace fear with understanding. And if we can't openly have that conversation, if people can't, openly and verbally communicate that understanding and what's hurting them ultimately, then they're always going to be stuck in that hamster wheel of fear and denial and shame, as opposed to realizing that you can master those life skills as you can in anything by going back to it again, simplifying the structure of your life and creating a strategy and sticking to it.
All right. I love that you brought up fear. That was actually my next question. You answered it before I even asked. Fear plays a major role in just moving forward in a lot of aspects of our lives. And I think in a previous podcast, I often tell my clients, we're always going to have that piece of fear, until, maybe not always, but in some aspect or another, we get this fear and these certain forms of anxiety in one form or another, and we have to figure out how we can make it work for us and not against us.
Yes.
So in the terms of grief and financial literacy, have you ever watched someone really just take fear by the horns and allow it to transform their lives and transmute that negativity into a financial prosperity future?
Yes, absolutely. I see it quite a bit. And to be honest, in my work, it's one of the most rewarding parts of the job. And I think, I think the one way that help people kind of take that next step in releasing that fear is a lot of the times, just like an impulsive decision, right, is people tend to put too much pressure on themselves. One of my favorite things to remind people is progress over perfection. We don't need to perfect this tomorrow, but make progress every single day. Every step in the right direction, every box you can check, everything there, momentum, then you can realize, and that transcends into more than just your finances. That's it all bundles up together. But I think too often people, you're right, we want instant results. We
Yes.
kid ourselves that we have to tackle every project at one time, and ultimately that's just building a house of cards.
Yes.
It's an act of desperation. And if you build a house of cards, it's going to take one strong wind and it's all going to blow over, right? Because you're not going to be prepared for the next life event, whether it's any of the categories we just discussed or something else. So it's important to set realistic expectations and realize progress over perfection. Just because you don't master something in 1 week or 1 month, there's no reason to feel as though you have failed, right? If you can look at the journey and realize that one step at a time, I'm getting better, I'm educating myself, I'm taking more ownership, then it is going to empower you and give you a feeling of invincibility, but a realistic one at that, in the sense that you start to transcend that to every part of your life. You realize that, you know what, maybe with my relationship, if I set realistic step-by-step goals, maybe the problems within my marriage could get better, right? As opposed to saying we need to fix this and we need to fix this now. Life is not that simple. And and like I said, if you can take the wins and feel good about that, that's going to keep you moving forward.
Yeah, I love that you said that. So, just the other day, I was having a conversation with a friend, and we were talking about the realm of addiction, and she just was saying, I just don't see like an out. And I said, well, there's always an out. There's always a possibility to create and to fix things. It just, you have to figure out where you want to start and how you want to propel and push things forward. So I'm happy that you highlighted that. So I have just two more questions, and then I'm not going to take up too much more of your time.
No, it's been I appreciate that sentiment, but it's a pleasure. I think we're having a real great conversation about something that doesn't get talked about enough. So it's truly you fire away, Rebecca, because It's an honor to answer.
Oh, thank you. So when you look back on your career over the years from now, like what impacted you the most? And how do you feel hopeful for impacting more people's lives in the future?
As far as what's impacted me the most over my career, it's getting to celebrate those wins. So, in my financial background, yes, I run a financial and credit repair company now, but a little more deeper into my 22 years in finance, I was a licensed mortgage loan officer for 16 years, multi-state. I was also in automotive finance for 6 years prior to, starting Requalify 360. And for me, celebrating the wins with my clients when they felt that the odds were kind of stacked against them, whether that was, being able to see somebody go from a point of denials and not being able to achieve their goals because maybe they were held back from something that they weren't addressing financially, or learning the systems and how to utilize them for their own behalfs, and then seeing them get the keys to their home. Or just recently I had a single mother that was getting denied, did not have the best credit in the world, had a lot to clean up. We really worked together, and in only a few months' time, she went from a vehicle where she had a 12-year-old and a 6-month-old, did not feel safe for her babies, being in this vehicle. So obviously that created a lot of stress and anxiety, and I'm sure sleepless nights for her. But for her to, again, drop her guard, take ownership of the mistakes, and as well as understanding that, pointing the finger at the system or another person, it might relieve some frustration, but it doesn't help you solve the problem at hand. And that's the accountability, because only you can make it better. Ultimately, nothing's gonna, just wave its wand. So we got her into a point where, she was able to, in a reasonable amount of time, qualify for a vehicle that, met her needs, as a working mom, and something that she could feel safe with, and at a cost that was within her monetary means. And to get those phone calls, those celebrations, and it's just awesome, Rebecca. So celebrating the wins with my clients, seeing them, think that they're just staring, up at a mountain that can't be climbed, and then realizing that with the right planning and the right strategy, you can get exactly where you want to be, as long as you hold yourself accountable, don't be harder on yourself than is necessary, and celebrate the wins, celebrate the milestones. So being a part of everybody's journey, that's huge for me. And then on a personal level, moving forward, I want to build my company and continue to build my company into something that is greater than what our field labels us, right? I mean, it's easy and it seems one-sided when you hear somebody is in financial and credit repair, but I'd like to think, we do a lot more than that. When people think of Ron Monaco and Requalify 360, I don't want them to just keep us in that financial category, because ultimately I want people to realize that I'm there to help them rebuild their confidence after life has disrupted their finances. And, so I'm not trying to say that I want to take the title of grief counselor, because I'm certainly not certified to do that. But from living it and having my own sleepless nights and knowing how hard life can be, and knowing that preparation means everything, I want to be the face of something bigger than just the financial industry. I want to be the person that has the clout moving forward of, Ron's going to take interest in me as a human being, not as a ticket number in line. And that's why I'm so personally involved with my client base.
So you brought it up, the financial piece of it. I know a lot of times people kind of shy away from doing credit repairs and getting their finances in order because of the financial responsibility that is associated with it, right? As much as we would love to help the world for free, the reality of it is we have to also eat. So how would you approach that with people who are like, this is something I really want to do and I really want to take ownership and accountability, but I'm afraid because this is where I am financially?
Right. And that's where we go through it with a fine-tooth comb. And that's where we're not your traditional credit repair company, right? It's not just about looking at somebody's credit report and seeing what's legally challengeable and getting items removed. That's certainly a part of it, but because of my financial background and just again my understanding of knowing what it's like to be in their shoes and be down and out and be stressed financially, that's where I say, if you really want me to help you build the roadmap, then you got to open it up to me, right? There's no judgment, but let's really look at it. Because the one thing that I have found very commonly is people have the ability to do more than they ever credit themselves for. And if they open the books to me, so to speak, and allow me to kind of look in their financial world as far as what they are making, what their spending habits are, and then we can really kind of personalize the blueprint to where they ultimately want to be. Now, there might sometimes maybe have to make some advice that you got to make some real life changes, right? Maybe you're overextended on your living income. Maybe the extra apps for entertainment to keep the kids occupied is exactly what your benchmark is away from getting where you're saying you want to be. It's like, and then hence, like I said before, it's sometimes you got to be okay with making yourself a little uncomfortable. But the one thing that I see most often is it's not necessarily a income problem, right? I think, don't get me wrong, I empathize with anybody, because the fact of the matter is, in today's current state of the world and in this country, we are definitely in one of the biggest financial crises that any of us have ever seen in our lifetimes, if ever. And it definitely is challenging. We definitely see the cost of living going up. We definitely see that incomes are not exactly matching those increase in costs, and it definitely means you have to have a more tactful approach. But the one thing that I do see is that there is, as far as if you're worried about making money, there are plenty of opportunities out there to make it. And a lot of my clients think they don't make enough. And really, when you kind of strip back the layers of the onion, you start to see really quickly that what they have is not an income problem. It's really a financial stress problem in terms of the controllables in their lives, right? Maybe because they haven't faced certain finances or been able to plan appropriately for their lives. they're kind of winging it like we all were and have, then you start to see where they could see more out of their income, because a lot of the time, I'm seeing people paying higher interest rates, having to pay security deposits, not getting job opportunities because of, what's on their credit report, which, paying higher insurance rates. And these are all controllable things. Again, we have to attack the core of it. And, as far as not having the money, I believe firmly there's always going to be a way to increase the income. For the most part, there might be some exceptions to that, especially if there's disabilities or fixed incomes involved. But even still, at the core of it, where are you financially limiting yourself without realizing it? Mm-hmm. And, if we can make some improvements on somebody's credit and help build that roadmap to at least a safer financial roadmap than what they're currently living by, I see a lot of people kind of wake up in the moment where again, if you allow me to really get into it, but that's part of my service and part of my job is, yes, to drop the guard, to get you to take the accountability and get ready and get excited to move forward, but realize that most problems have solutions. It's just sometimes we need somebody that's already experienced it to help us find the path.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Ron. So do you have any closing remarks that you would like everyone to know anything about you or how to reach you?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Certainly, and I'll make sure you have the information. But again, my name is Ron Monaco. I represent Requalify 360. If anything that we've spoken about today hits home to you, if you're ready to kind of start moving on from the shame spiral that can be the financial world and ready to make an improvement in your life, I would love to be a part of your journey. You can find me at Requalify 360. That's Requalify360.com. You can schedule a free consultation. It's just a conversation. It's just understanding you, what you feel is holding you back, and ultimately where you want to get. And I'm going to help you peel the layers of that onion and put that process together. And certainly, take a look at us on social media as well. We are still in our infancy as a company. We're really building this strong, Facebook being our largest platform right now. So please, check us out, follow us at Requalified 360. And you can message me there directly as well. I do not use bots, and I do respond personally. So if in today's technological world, I want you to be rest assured that you can reach me directly. I want to be a part of the journey. And lastly, as far as my closing message, anything that I could ask for any of your listeners today to remember, the simple answer is this. I want you all to know that no matter what chapter of life that you are in, whether it's divorce, job loss, grief, illness, or any kind of financial hardship, you're not defined by what happened to you. Financial healing is possible. Confidence can be rebuilt, and opportunities can return. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply decide to look forward instead of continuing to look back.
Thank you so much for that remark, Ron. So, you guys, thank you so much for joining us. Remember that grief may change your life, but it doesn't have to define your future. So, every healthy financial decision is an act of healing. Until next time, give yourself a lot of grace, give yourself a lot of protection with your peace, and keep planting those seeds that you feel like you deserve in your life. If you need to get in contact with me, please send me a message, Rebecca Hall at amustardseedcare.com, or you can always go to my website, www.amustardseedcare.com. Thanks, you guys. See you next time.
Yeah. They say faith moves mountains, but the only thing I've seen is that my fear is certain. Easy to encourage when you're on the other side of the mountain. Easier said when the damage is done. How do I breathe when the weight of the world is crushing me? Hard to see, only have faith that guides me. A mustard seed of belief, carried by the divine, gives me relief. Tried by the fire, disagree that I'm supposed to be forever tired. Faith moves mountains, faith moves mountains. I keep my eyes on high, mustard seed in my hand. Wasn't chosen to be on the front line, chosen to be the divine lifeline. I'm so divine, given the tools to pay off my ancestors' deadline. Their wildest dreams erasing the curses that try to eradicate the DNA that creates our lifeline. Generational warrior, reinvent the wheel, cause the path was broken. Trials and tribulations, I'm thankful, because now I've been awoken. A mustard seed of belief, carried by the divine, gives me relief. Tried by the fire, disagree that I'm supposed to be forever tired. Faith moves mountains, faith moves mountains. I keep my eyes on high, mustard seed in my hand. Faith moves mountains, faith moves mountains. If all it takes is faith, then I still stand. If all it takes is faith, then with every breath I take, I give praise to the Most High for being the chosen. Oh, faith moves mountains, faith moves mountains. Oh, faith moves mountains. I keep my eyes on high, mustard seed in my faith moves mountains. If all it takes is faith, then I still stand.